Hi, this is Sally, and this is yet another project that I did 10 years ago. My friend brought it by the other day, and I will be showing you how to recover a little vanity store. So let's get on with it. I'm just going to unscrew these. As you turn the legs, you'll get to all of the screws. And then I'm just going to put those into a little plastic bag. I don't really need to replace these. Sometimes I do replace them if the holes underneath are really ripped up, but I don't think these are. These aren't too bad. Sometimes I just move it around a little bit and then re-screw new holes. So just check to see what these look like before you decide what to do. I've put the screwdriver in with the bag as well because sometimes I lose those. So all of that's kept together for later. I am just going to remove the base. Make sure to get all of the staples out. Some of these are breaking, so it's hit and miss. And I'll do that all the way around the underneath and take the cover off. This is back tacked on with cardboard, so I'm just going to pull it. Sometimes they come off really easily like this, and sometimes not so easy. I'll work my way all the way across and separate out the lining and everything else. I've turned the seat upside down and I'm going to see if I can pull the back tacking and piping off at the same time. Sometimes you can. Sometimes you can just roll it and it will just pull all the staples out. This chair has been really difficult getting staples out, so I'm going to have to do them staple by staple until they're all out. They're all kind of rusty, which is probably why I'm having a hard time with them. Pull any straightened staples out or anything else that's half out. See how much you can reuse of things if possible, because it saves on money. And sometimes I don't reuse it on the project it comes off. I sometimes roll it up and use it on a second one as part filler. Some areas on here are easier to remove than others. I have here the seat, and I've just folded it down the center of here, and I think I'm going to take this as the center of the pattern. Put that there like that, straighten it out along this line here and pull it out. I think I need to go over one pattern. It's just a little bit close. I thought I had a little bit more room on here, so I wouldn't have to do that. Let's start again over here. Always make sure you've got enough fabric so that you can do everything you need. Knowing that I have to use the rest of the fabric for another project just means I'm going to be a little bit more careful. Okay, that's that one to there, which should mean that this comes out and the pattern match should be on here and here, which it is. So I'm quite pleased with that. Because it's kind of in the center here, I am going to pin it. I don't usually pin it, but I just need to make sure that this is exactly where I need it to be. Now this is where the arm comes in, so I need to make sure that this pattern matches on the other side. It should do because it is circular, and there it is on here. I'm going to come down here, out just a little bit, and then follow around. I'm going to cut it as evenly as possible and round the other side. I'm actually a little bit disappointed. It is a bit longer here, which I thought it might be, but over here it's a little bit more blue than over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it along there, make sure that that is in line and centered across there. Let's see how centered that looks. And I am going to very carefully trim that round so it's more rounded, because I'm a little bit disappointed that it came out that far. Before I start cutting, I'm going to fold this one in half as well. There to there, and then there to there. Maybe I should have done it this way to start off with, which is fine. And if I look at here, it's 9 inches, 9 inches. 3 of them it's 9 inches. It's just this top one that's not. So if I put this on here at 9 inches, you can see it was overcut. I am going to cut it to 9 inches. When I originally did it, I hadn't ironed the fabric, so it hadn't been pulled out properly, which is probably just as well. I hadn't realised how flexible this was. And I'll do this on round. Just do it little increments. With a thinner fabric, you can do 2 layers at a time, which is what I'm doing. If it was a thicker fabric or one that kept twisting, then I would have to do it each layer. It always pays to double check. Now I'll cut on round. It still is a little bit more white on here than this side. That's very weird and irritating. See if I can cut it better if I do it this way. It might just be that one side of the pattern isn't as even as the other. If I fold it down on here for the center of the pattern, like that, makes just a minute bit of difference. I'll just roll it a little bit better onto that center. I'm just going to trim that a little ways back. Even though I took it in a little bit, it's still not the same. I have here a couple of lengths of piping. I've cut it on the bias and sew down. It's on a 2.4 stitch length. I'm going to just string some along. When I get to the end, fold that over, put my next bit on and add that onto the line. Then with the raw edges together, sew the piping flange around the piping cord. When you come to a join, cut back to 1/4 inch for most fabrics. A thinner fabric is not so necessary, but certainly a thick fabric. When you get closer, just make sure the seam is still open and sew that on through. Make your way to the next join or the end of your piping cord. What I decided was this was the center mark, which means that I'm going to put my piping a little bit further back, because that goes along the outside of the back where the arm would be. I'm going to sew this into position. Because I cut this on a bias, I can just round it off like this and start sewing. It's on the longest stitch. I'm just laying it on top of the fabric. I'm not pulling the fabric underneath. I don't want it to be misshapen. And now I'm just going to ease it all the way around to the other side. I'm just going to bring it in line with here, matching here, which is just a few more stitches. I've just done something I really dislike doing, and that is taken a piece right out of the center of the fabric. The way the pattern goes, I had to very carefully decide where I was going to take it from. So I'm going to measure, comes in under here and continues the pattern down, but it will just carry on into the sides here on either side, so it's nice and even. I'm going to put a pin on that point, and my allowance should be 1/2 inch. Something I have noticed is there's a little bit of a loop there, which I don't want. So I'm just going to pull it one way and then the other. Make sure that that is as small as can be. I'll just pull it in from the other side. Pulled that over there like that, and it just came through. From the front it looks fine. Doesn't look like anything was wrong. When it's pulled onto the front, it will be fine. Now, I very carefully put this side on. I started in the center because this is the round side. Now I'm just going to fold this in half to make sure that I match that as well as possible. So around about there, I'm going to put a very small hem on. It's not even 1/4 inch, and I'm going to start here on this end, forward and back. It's having about 1/4 inch seam allowance on it, and I'm not pulling this like this. I'm kind of pushing it in because I don't want it to be stretched out. So I'm allowing the fabric to go into shape. Now it might push some of the fabric forward, and that's okay, as long as I'm not pulling it. And if I am, I'm pulling from this side so that it will come into shape. Because it's quite a large circle, it shouldn't need that happening. And you just rotate the fabric. As I get to the middle, I just let it cross over slightly, as that will reinforce that area. And I'll carry on stitching a little bit further. This will open up. There's a little bar that goes at the back here, and that will just make sure that's nice and tight. So here is the circle, which I can see on this side, and there is the circle that side, which I'm going to line up and double check on the other side that that is absolutely lined up. That will do. Lay the border out flat, pull that over and pop that into place. I have the stitch on the longest stitch, and I've moved the needle over one, and I'm just going to run the curve of this level with the border from the center on round like this. I'm not pulling the top, I'm just letting it roll into place, and I'm going to take it to the end here and reverse. And check the center here, make sure it's where I want it, exactly where I want it. So now I've got to work out where it comes to on this side, and usually what I do is I find a pattern. So if I look here, this leaf comes out and across, and it looks like it's this here. So if I try to line this part up with this part on the other side, let's have a look. This sometimes takes 2 or 3 little efforts to do. If I do this, you'll see what I'm talking about. So the pattern here on the border is like that, and the pattern on the other side like that. So very, very similar. We've got the blue there, the leaf comes out at the top. I think if I wriggle that a little bit, it will come into line, and I'll be able to use that as my starting point on this side to sew to the centre. Having worked out where the second side should go in, I'm going to just sew this side in. It should be more or less where I need it. Start off. I won't do a forward and reverse at the beginning there, just in case I need to unpick it. I'm hoping this works. It's so close. I just can't have a pleat on the centre front, that's all. It won't be the first time I've had to undo my own work. It went in okay. If I pull it down this side, it's not wrinkled where I started here. I'm just going to go a little bit further, but the other way, to hold that all into place. I was a little bit concerned about the height of the foam, which is a little bit higher than I wanted. So I have measured down 2.5 inches to here. So long as the underside of the seat is on here and here, as I go around, it should all come in nice and evenly. I want to find the centre front of this, so I have just drawn a line across here from the bottom of this dowel to the bottom of this dowel, which is where the sides come round. And then I'm running this along the line here so it's nice and straight, and I've got my ruler there. Just line that up. So from the centre of the dowel here to the centre front. Now you'll see that this line does not line up with this. Just because you've got something squared on the bottom doesn't mean to say it is square. So my centre has to go here. Now there's some bits and pieces that I didn't get out. Make sure that they're either banged right in so they can't tear your skin or the fabric. These were quite difficult to get out. So I'm going to knock some of these staples back in and then start pulling this over the front and into place. I smoothed the back in. I've managed to pull that side in, and I'm going to pull that down and start securing along the back here too. It should come nicely around. I'm pulling this white mark at the base of the seat there. I'm going to twist it and make sure it's nice and even coming through. Because if this is even, it means it goes evenly at the top. Might vary a little bit, but not too much. I think the last one on here comes right under the arm here, and I had to pull it down and underneath. Only because it gets a bit too close here and I can't get the staple gun in, and then underneath. This looks nice and even, so I'm going to work out the inside back coming in here. I'm going to take the pattern to pieces for the inside back, as I need to make sure I get this right. Just pull it all to pieces. I don't often use patterns, but because it's got this piping on, I want it to be exact. I think this is where I want to take it. It's a rounded shape. It goes over quite a ways, so I'm not going to worry that I don't come all the way up on there. And I am going to cut a little bit lower than it says, because I'm going to try it out, because there's a pattern I want to match. I need to make sure it's right. If I line this up, I have my pattern, so I think what I'm going to do is put a pin here. This is where I want my piping to go, so I do have to just adjust this a little bit, but not very much, and that's my centre mark. I'll take it a bit lower like that, because the piping will kind of hide anything, and the rest of the pattern should pull in nicely. Now this is the inside back, and I'm going to go a little bit further over. And I realised when I was cutting that some of this came in a little bit further than I wanted it to. So I put pins in to guide me for where I want to put the piping. That's the first one can come out. And then the rest should just follow in place. The piping should be 1/2 inch in from the edge, so I will just do that as a general rule all the way along. Make sure it goes in as smoothly as you can. I've got the same problem on the other end of this back, so I will follow the pin marks when I get there. I have this, which I took off the original inside back, and I'm going to line that up with the centre like that, and I'm going to sew that into place. I might as well use the original. There's no reason for exchanging that one. I'll move the stitch over just a little bit and continue to sew that into place. As before, I'm working for the center out to the end, and then I'll work out how to get the other side in. I've pushed this into place. I could have brought the piping a little bit higher, but I think it'll be fine. As long as the piping stays more or less even all the way around, just like I did before. This is the inside back, but from the top. I'm going to just make sure that that's even as I go around. And then that should mean that the piping will be even on the inside. This took a little bit to get in properly because I wanted this piece of cording to be right there. But I also had to pull the back of this fabric in a little bit further. It was about 1/4 inch, which meant I had to pull it over the side and secure it and then re-secure the inside back. I think that looks better. The fabric is a little bit flimsy, although it is a linen union, but that looks relatively even. I pulled in the top here and secured it so it's even both sides. A different thickness and a different weave on a fabric can make a huge difference when you're putting it in. I am pleased with this. I think it looks nice and fresh. Okay, so I'm just popping the back of this little chair in, mainly because getting this back in nice and evenly is a little bit awkward because I can't balance it very easily. So here's the center of the pattern here. I'm going to just put a pin in like that, there, and another one here so that it doesn't move. I'm going to bring this around and underneath so that I can get the right shape in, and I'm going to pop that under there to roll that under where I can. Make sure that it's even around the top and pin that in, and the same on the other side. Just pull it around and fold it under. And whatever's happening with the pattern here has to happen with the pattern here. So I'm just going to take a little while to make sure everything's rolled in to where it needs to be, and then into the corner here. This is coming in here, so hopefully I'll get that to match on the other side. There it comes in. So I'm going to remove these two staples and move them down just a little bit so that I can get that in to the right place there. Now I decided to hand sew the back in. I've started here and I'm working my way across. I'm just putting tiny little stitches. They're about 1/4 inch, if that. Some might be a little bit bigger, others not quite so big. The reason is it's very pretty fabric with quite a large pattern on, so I really want the pattern to show rather than have it all split up with piping. So although I've got piping on it, I just didn't feel that I wanted to put piping along the back here. When you've done about 4 or 5 stitches, pull your thread and it shouldn't knot. The other reason I've chosen to do it this way is I've managed to pin the back in quite nicely, and if I back tack it, it might go out of kilter, which would be a bit sad. And I really need to save some of the fabric for another project that I'm doing for this lady. When you're sewing it, just make sure your stitch comes out. It goes in exactly opposite so that everything stays nice and tight. And again, pull it in. The wadding I've put right into here, so I might actually be catching it, I'm not sure, but I wanted that as high as I could. When I attach it at the bottom, I'll just pull it slightly and that won't put too much stress on the stitches. Move that one, pull that down a little bit and carry along. So I've put some staples in round the back, and all I did was I pulled it as straight as I could from the top down so that it wouldn't wrinkle. I need to come in here and shape it. I think what I'm going to do is pin it here from the inside out so it can't move. Should be secure enough. I need to come in here and round and shape it. So this pin should hold it more or less where I want to shape it to. And pop it like that and decide where I'm going to come into. And I think I like the way the piping comes down. So I'm just going to cut that straight down, but not the fabric. The reason I'm choosing here is if I go any further back, it's a bit ripply. So that comes in nice and straight there and around like that. So I'm cutting back slightly from the side of the chair. My finger is against the fabric so I can't cut it by mistake to the top. Now obviously this is a little bit further out. I'm going to cut down here in a straight line because I can fold that back as I get to it like that, and I'm going to cut this level with the top here. It should give me about 1/2 inch of fabric to hide. Bring it out just a little bit up here and in a straight line. Roll that back behind there. You'll see that this automatically comes in underneath, so I don't have to worry about anything showing there. Put a pin there to hold it and fold it under. I'm using dressmaking pins because they don't leave big marks, and I'm just going to ease that round so it looks nice and smooth. Because it's on the bias, it should actually come out quite nicely. There we go, without me having to cut anything extra. Bring that into here and put one a little bit higher there, and then I'm just going to fold this underneath. The fold comes in and down, so I don't need to worry about too much bulk there. That on there. I can move this pin underneath because that doesn't need to be there anymore. I'm going to cut a little bit more off. Now I could make it absolutely up and down, but I think that'll hold, and I can take that underneath when I've finished and it will hold that into position. I might take that staple out actually, and then that will fold under nicely. That fits better. As you see, it doesn't really show where the wrinkles are because it hides all of that, which is what I need it to do. Pop a pin here. When it's sewn in, I will then pull this fabric underneath here and secure it. But I'm going to sew this in first. I've come up all the way up the side here to the top, and I am just going to run some more little stitches. This will reinforce this corner. It's also a way of casting off, because after a while, if I go about 2 or 3 inches in, I won't need to worry about leaving a big mess casting it off, because there'll be enough friction on here that it won't pull through. These stitches can be a little bit longer than the 1/4 inch that I was putting in earlier, and I'm just going to pull that thread all the way up there. Now I'll do the other side and secure the bottom. I'm going to start at the centre back. I usually start in the centre back. That's just one of my preferences. I'm going to put it over the side because that will hold it. This is rather fine fabric, and I'm just going to put a staple in every inch as I go round. I've cut them both back so they meet. I'll fold that one underneath like that, that one on top and across. It's got a nice little crossover there, and I'm going to staple it so it can't move. Thank you for joining me on this little project. My friend's going to think it's new because I've had it for like 6 months. I started it and then various other things happened. So she's going to be delighted that she's got this back. All I've got to do is put the base on. Seem to have mislaid the screws for that at the moment, but they'll turn up. I'm thinking it went in really well. I like the plainness of it. Just having the piping cord here across the inside and underneath is nice, and the back went in really prettily as well. Otherwise it would have been a little bit bitty, and I was struggling putting the staples in on the sides. There's a compound material and it just wasn't working very well. So if you have that problem and you can get some staples in to hold something, secure them as best you can and then hand sew. You'll always get a nice little look from there. If you'd like to see more from me, please subscribe, hit the bell button, and a few thumbs up would be absolutely brilliant. And in the meantime, take care, see you later. Ciao!